Welcome everybody. As everyone's coming in, we're going to show a few slides. So when everyone kind of gets settled in, then we will start. So enjoy the pictures while we just wait.
Can you see me? Beautiful.
Again, for those who are just joining us, we are going to start in just a minute, but we're just showing some pictures just while everyone gets settled in. Good evening, everybody. It's nice to see everybody. Happy spring. And thank you for joining us for our second installation of our literary program at Randall's Island Park Alliance. We are starting tonight with a new book, as you all know, and we have three wonderful people that are joining us that are part of our team. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on them, and then I will turn the floor over to Elizabeth. And then at the end, I'll let you know what's coming up as well, so you know what else you can join us for. So first I'll introduce Elizabeth. Many of you have already met her. Elizabeth Howard is our writer in residence. She's a journalist, author, and artist, and she's been wonderful in helping us move our literary program forward, where we're combining nature, science, and literature. And then I'm going to introduce Jackie Wu. Jackie is our Park is Lab coordinator with the Natural Areas team, and her focus is ecological topics of fish, pollinators, and birds. So Jackie will talk about that on the island. And then Victoria Cam, who just joined RIPA just a week and a half ago, is part of our horticulture team. And her focus is landscape architecture, sustainability, and horticulture. And she's worked in volunteers at a number of the parks and the city parks and gardens, and we're very lucky to have her. So I just want to welcome everybody and welcome Jackie and Victoria and Elizabeth, and I will turn it over. And we can also go back to the pictures at some point too. So welcome and thank you all.
Thank you, Nikki. And for those of you who are listening closely, and you might hear when Nikki speaks a bird in the background, that is actually Randall, and Randall is a rescue parakeet. When I first started hearing that, I asked you about that, Nikki, and I think you should tell us just for a minute about your rescue parakeet.
Rescue. I was using the cart and going along the waterfront. I hadn't been with RIPA very long. And I saw a little parakeet sitting, wasn't sure it was a parakeet, sitting on the side right by the water, and he was lethargic, and so I was a little bit worried. And there was nobody around, so thinking he was a parakeet, I didn't really think he belonged kind of wild out in the park, so I picked him up. He wasn't all that happy with me. Drove back with one hand, holding him in the other, and then actually Chris, who I believe is on with us, the Natural Areas manager, it confirmed he was a parakeet, and so I brought him home, and he now belongs to me. So he is quite entertaining, and yes, he will sing along probably as we talk. So,
okay. Well, yeah. Perhaps we'll meet Randall some evening. Yeah. One of the wonders of Randall's Island. Well, thank you, Nikki. And Last week when the temperature went up, I took out my bicycle and it was the first time that I was able to ride around the island. I photographed my shadow across a patch of Solomon's seal, which is a flower that I wasn't familiar with. I felt such a sense of lightness of being. I think after the long winter when we were all quarantining and self-tethering, and it was so nice to be out. I think it's given us a new appreciation for spring and for nature and possibly for this small revolving planet that we're on. We certainly need to take care of it. Through, as Nikki mentioned, through the Randall's Island Literary Program, we're looking at science, literature, and nature. And we finished reading Helen McDonald's Vesper Flights, and now we're reading Amy Nesukumatahill's World of Wonders in praise of fireflies, whale sharks, and other astonishment. She is a poet, so I think that is just a beautiful title. And much like Helen McDonald's book, at its essence, it's a book about love and family, finding our place in nature or in the world, and then recognizing how we're different. And actually, Helen was not able to join one of our programs because she is in London and she just wasn't able to, but Amy will, and she's going to be with us on April 22nd, Thursday evening. So I hope you will save that date and join us for that. It should be a really interesting conversation. Reading World of Wonders reminded me, and I'm sure those of you who've read the book, of all of the wonders on Randall's Island, such a special natural place. And so that's why I thought it would be nice to have Jackie and Victoria take us by the hand and lead us through this park and share some of the wonders that they can share with us that are important to them. But I want to start first, Jackie, and have you tell us a little bit about what you do. Your title is just Park as Lab Coordinator. Now, I thought that was fascinating because clearly nature is constantly ever changing.
Yeah, it
is a laboratory.
Once you know what Park as Lab is, it's a very descriptive title, but Park as Lab is essentially the idea of using not just a park in the sense of like a sports field and all of the events that go on, but also that there is nature in the park itself. And so the idea is kind of natural and nature and ecology for the people, by the people. So we're really interested in helping our community answer any questions they have about Randall's Island. And so a lot of the projects that we do are started from a question that somebody might have. So somebody potentially is interested in what fish we have in the East River, Harlem River, Bronx Kill. And so we'll go out and we'll go seining, we'll go put little killie fish traps, we'll go hook and line fishing to answer these questions. And we invite well, now it's a little hard, but traditionally we'll invite the community to come out with us so they can go seining and experience this. And then down the line, if somebody, especially now with a lot of like remote projects going on for students, they can take all of this data that we share on our website and they can create a project out of that as well. So it's kind of from beginning to end, it's taking the community with us to understand more about their surroundings.
That's really wonderful. So how does one submit a question?
Yeah, so originally we would have surveys that we would hand out at all of the tabling events we go to. Now that tabling events have kind of gone virtual, we're working on putting a survey on our Park as Lab webpage on the Randall's Island Park Alliance website. But also, you can feel free to email me any questions you have, and I would be happy to work out an idea of how to answer said question.
Okay, good. So Victoria, you're a seasonal horticulturist, and you, as Mickey said, you grew up in New York City and you've worked in most of the parks. You've worked in Battery Park and Wave Hill and Central Park. So what do you do as a seasonal horticulturalist?
Well, I would say that a lot of the tasks that horticulturists and gardeners have are pretty similar. There's a lot of maintaining the grounds and making sure that everything is growing well and properly. But I think really what makes it different is the setting and the different interactions that public horticulture offers in the environment. So there's a lot of community-based relationships that you're growing between the people and the land. And that's what I think horticulture is very important for, and makes it so special as a way of interacting with that space.
So for those of you who know me, know that I love to read authors' words as kind of a prompt for it instead of asking direct questions. So I'm going to read from the chapter entitled Monarch Butterfly. Butterflies have always been special to my boys. In preschool, my eldest loved them so much, he'd beg me to play videos on YouTube in which butterflies emerge from their chrysalises, and he memorized the stoic narration of their elaborate hatching process verbatim. The one and only time he has ever gotten in trouble at school in the entirety of his tender 12 years was when a classmate told him that only girls could like butterflies. So he did what any butterfly-loving person would do. He said, "Shut up, stupid face." Of course, the teacher only heard my son's outburst, which led to the first and only time I marched myself to the principal's office to speak on my son's behalf. But I digress. What I mean is, the monarch butterfly means so much to our whole family. Every house we've lived in as a married couple has had plenty of milkweed and other butterfly attractors. In fact, the very first thing we planted in our garden here in Mississippi was scarlet milkweed, a vibrant, leggy plant with a confetti of red-orange blossoms beckoning to butterflies from every tip. Jackie, can you reflect on that?
Sure. I find it, I guess, interesting and that it's from such a young age, things seem so gendered, and I don't know how it gets to be that way, but like saying butterflies are, for girls, or if you're a boy, you have to like beetles, and it's interesting to me because when you look at currently still a lot of the top researchers in these fields, it's still predominantly men. And so the fact that like as a young kid, you're kind of told, no, you can only like this or you can only like that. But as time goes on, it's still mostly skewed one way. I wonder what happens in the middle where the separations kind of, I guess, disappear in a sense, but also don't. But it is nice that now there are a lot of organizations pushing STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, so that it's kind of a more well-balanced interest for everybody. And kind of, Amy is right, like you should encourage it from a young child and not just, start in high school. But if a boy is interested in butterflies, so be it. I can't imagine that anybody who sees a butterfly coming out of a chrysalis would say, that's definitely only for girls from ages 6 to 12. Like I think everybody would love seeing that.
Victoria, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was thinking about how these kinds of interactions could lead to that sheltering of a person's outlook in life and their choices and their decision making. I would say that if these interactions hadn't happened, how would this child achieve their goals or find a career that they enjoy? So I also thought that maybe this kind of exposure, this veil that separates, as Jackie mentioned, the person and their potential interest in another topic or a subject also could come from your exposure to nature and how perhaps maybe people from cities are not experiencing nature the same way someone who is from the country or a suburb might. And that kind of differentiating experience would hinder their choices in life making in a sense. So I think with what the island is doing with these different educational programs and allowing these children's and school groups to interact with each other and with the island and the different activities that they have, that sort of encourages and brings the children to learn more about the environment and create that sense of nature for cities.
So you grew up in the city, didn't you, Victoria?
Yes, yeah.
So did you feel when you grew up in parks? I mean, you know New York City parks. So when you travel out of an urban area, does it feel different to you, or do you feel that you've had through, I mean, you need the park experience?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, a lot of the parks in the cities are hard infrastructure and they don't really put forth the plants to play. And I think, and especially in design, we always analyze the hardscape first to create the purpose, the form of the space. And plants often seem like an afterthought in those designs. So I think to emphasize that implementation is important and will encourage the people in cities to become more interested in plants in that sense and have that direct exposure rather than viewing the hardscapes all the time.
I'm going to read from the Cactus Wren chapter. My father worked long hours as an NICU respiratory therapist at Good Samaritan Hospital in downtown Phoenix. I know he must have been utterly exhausted by his week's delicate work and by raising 2 giggly elementary school aged girls on his own that year. And yet almost every weekend we headed for the hiking trails of Camelback Mountain. I never saw any other Asian Americans there. I don't know if my father noticed. Perhaps he was too busy pointing out mica-edged rocks or the occasional chuck walls skittering behind a boulder. Or perhaps he was too busy making sure his daughter knew how to tell time with the sun, or how to avoid stepping on wiggly loose rocks, or how to stay on a solid path. It was one more way we were different from other families in our suburban neighborhood. I don't know anyone else's dad who took the time to do this with his kids. And I think Randall's Island is so welcoming to families. Jackie, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I think the draw of Randall's Island is that there's so much there. You know, we've got the soccer fields, we've got the baseball fields, so you can come for sports. You can, in non-COVID times, you could come for all the events that we host, but it's also a nice place to go for a walk, to, you know, walk your dog, take a bike ride. For me, it's nice because there are places where you can kind of get to where if you're looking right ahead of you, it almost seems like the world disappears. Of course, you know, the RFK Bridge is still there. If you look up, you know, oh yes, I'm in New York City, but like the Wildflower Meadows, when they're in the height of the growing season, I guess I'm not particularly very tall, but it gets to a point where like I can't see my teammates if they're around the corner. And it's really different feeling, I guess, when you grow up, you know, surrounded by tall buildings and you can't see the sky, but when it's plants and you hear like the wind whistling through, it's nice. I really enjoy it. But then at the same time, being a kid from the city, is still knowing that, okay, I'm still in New York City, you know, it's not just the vast plains. It's a good balance for me.
So what are some of the, perhaps you can describe one of the places on the island that's very special for you, that's kind of a wonder.
Yeah, I really like the New York City. I really like the Wildflower Meadow that is kind of right off of Central Road. It's by one of the bus stops. It's when it's like in the peak of its season, this is where the monarchs pass through. So there's always monarch butterflies flying around. There's a nice little bee hotel for solitary bees. And it kind of goes through like a progression of color depending on when you are. So like there's a field of green first, and then a field of yellow, and then almost like a goldeny yellow. So it continuously changes, which is really nice.
Now, when will those flowers start blooming? Or I think they are now. I mean, a few of the daffodils and crocuses are up, but so it should be soon, right?
Yeah, well, I believe the horticulture team does a really good job of taking care of it. So right now they've kind of let it reset, but I'm excited for when everything kind of grows back into that tall, luscious green phase. A lot of the deep yellows kind of come during like, I would say the early to late fall, which is perfect weather to go for a stroll anyways. So.
Victoria?
Yeah, so I thought that I haven't spent that much time on Randall's Islands, but I have noticed that the places where we've been working, which is along the water's edge, there are a lot of really nooks and crannies where people and children could create that space of wonder for themselves. And I think a lot of play is also what you make of it. Your space is what you make of it. And in that sense, they are protected in that area. They can contemplate and create that environment for their own. So there's a lot of versatility of use for all the spaces on the island, it seems. And since it's such a big island and there's so many different gardens and interactions with the plants and elevation spaces where you could overlook the different areas. And I think that's essentially what the author was maybe considering about how the different spaces could be a function of that environment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, her family moved many times. I mean, she talks about that. You know, they go from suburban Ohio, and then now she's living in Mississippi, and they lived in Arizona, and then her mother was a doctor working in a hospital, and so often they would live near the hospital. So they would go from very different geographic parts of the country, and so that's why I think it's nice to think about the different, how aware she is of these things. But when you read this and you read it a second time and you realize that she really has focused on those plants and trees and elements of nature that are different, that aren't ones that we necessarily read about every day. There's something a little bit exotic about them. And I think that's, as a poet, it's using your imagination and thinking about what discovery, discovery in science, discovery in language, just kind of, looking at something that's new, which I think is what a park offers us. And there are enough kind of places on Randall's Island that are not kind of manicured in a way, so that you really could find your own little space there for writing or thinking or whatever you might do. We are having on April 8th, Rebecca Allen, who's a wonderful artist. I've known Rebecca for years, and she's going to do a program on nature drawing. So kind of with prompts from the book. So I hope you'll all join us on the 8th with a sketchbook and we can start drawing some things. I'm going to read from the chapter Dragon Fruit. And I selected this one because it seems so urban, and I particularly loved her descriptions. The neon pink of a dragon fruit screams summertime. Pop music, sunglasses balanced on the top of my head, weather too warm for socks. It means vintage MTV and stretchy spears of bubblegum popped and snapped in the back rows of a school bus. It's electrocution. It's the shade of lipstick I was never allowed to wear, full of pearl powder and unpronounceable chemicals, the shade worn by Boy George, Whitney Houston, and various members of Duran Duran on the album covers I cherished most. You would think a fruit that screams this loud would have a veritable pop of flavor too, but most people agree that the dragon fruit, for all its bluster and noise, tastes like the quietest of melons. Still, the dragon fruits my parents grow in their backyard and proudly bring in a sack when they visit. These fruits, hand-watered and tended by my parents, are as sweet as peaches to me. These fruits are native to Central America, but the first time I tried one was at a dinner in Singapore. I was a visiting writer at a university there, and I had brought my mother along as my guest. I was so taken with the color that I went searching for more. During our downtime, I asked a taxi driver to take us to Lul Pauset, one of the famous hawker centers full of local food in the heart of Singapore. There I was assured by my host, dragon fruit was a flavor present in many of the food stalls, offered up in the colorful shakes and ice creams and jams. Victoria, do you have a thought about that?
Oh, wow. I really like this passage because of I've never considered fruit to have that sort of impact on a person. So it seemed that she felt that this fruit really meant something that dredged up these memories for her, the sense of nostalgia, I would say. And I thought that was a really interesting concept to have from such a small piece of fruit. So I think in terms of comparing that aspect to summer, I would say that most children and young adults would end up having this sense of nostalgia in summer, and they would always have this moment in time where they would call back to and recall these elements of free time. It's unburdened by time during the school year, and this is during the school year. It would be the fall, winter, and excuse me for 1 second. They would be focused on their work, and when summer comes around, they have all of this time to experience the nature and the plants. So I thought this was a really interesting concept to compare with the summer months. And I think that the author also describes summer having a loud exterior and a quiet interior as well. So I thought that maybe this is a good idea of beginning and ending surrounding the fall, winter, and spring months as well. So it really becomes this moment of time and far away from the work that we associate with bunkering down and getting straight to work for the winter. So this summer here is the nostalgia of the dragon fruit, I would say. And as for all the gardens that are coming into play for the spring and summertime, all the plants that are coming in, I think we always have that. Those plants are there, and they're the same plants that come back every season. And they're no matter how many times we cut them back, this is still the same plant. And for many people, they see these plants perhaps in their memories and in their childhood, and they associate these plants with those moments of summertime from their childhood. And to be able to bring these specific plants and this environment back into their lives, into these parks, we were making that connection where their memories always will be there for them, and that sense of whatever moments, good moments they had as in the summer times. So I think a lot of the spaces that are in cities are really important. As everyone spends that time outside, they'll be able to recall those summer memories from the environment and the space among the plants. And I think that's it.
Well, I was going to ask you, Victoria, to look into your memory, since you're now a horticulturist. You must remember when you were a child in the parks. There must be some flowers that really meant something to you, and that's why you continue to go back to parks. Is there? I mean, is there a moment when you were young playing in parks, or what really inspired you to want to work in parks and with horticulture?
Well, it wasn't really quite a childhood memory, because as I mentioned before, a lot of the parks were hardscapes and they didn't have that plant implementation. It was mostly just a career choice that I thought would be really fun. I started taking these classes at Brooklyn Botanic Garden, and I really enjoyed what I was learning and just being out in the fields. And I think that's really what helped me appreciate the public spaces in terms of the plant sense more. And as I learned more, I started to see these different perspectives of the gardens themselves. It started changing for me, and it started having more meaning to me. And I think that's also a lot of what maybe people will see for these plants. If they continue to see them each year, they have that deeper meaning for them and that space for themselves.
Jackie, did you have a reflection on this?
I think what Amy and Victoria had said, kind of when you're a student, when you're in school, summer seems like a very abrupt thing. It's, one day you're in school and the next day you've got a month, 2 months to kind of spend however you will. And there's kind of a certain sense of nostalgia for that, where things change so quickly. But it's also nice now, I think, for the way that I kind of keep track of the seasons isn't by, okay, if I wake up tomorrow, I have 2 months to do whatever I want, and then I'll go back to studying my butt off. But now it's more of, like I was saying before, watching the changes in our surroundings. So like, I can kind of tell that it's, spring is coming around if I see the crocuses coming up, or I can kind of tell that summer is here if there are more black sea bass coming up in the river, or fall is around the corner if there's more like spotted cucumber beetles coming around. And then winter is there if the brants are showing up and it's going to be cold. So I think there's, as nice as it was to kind of have like a very strict sense to my time, I guess, it's also nice to have this more gradual change in life, I guess, kind of moving at a more gradual pace. I think it makes time seem less scary. Yeah.
So Jackie, you're a marine biologist, and as I walk along, I mean, one of the special aspects of right down next river, I mean, you along the river there. What kind of creatures do you find? I mean, we can't see them, but what are the special things that are there? The wonders.
Yeah, it's really, I always part of me always wishes that we have kind of clear waters like the Caribbean, so you can look down and you can see things. But at the same time, our water is such a murky color because it is such a vibrant food source for everything. And so the fact that it is kind of always this weird brownish green color is a good thing. But it is nice that we can go in the water at times and go seining and share with people what's in the water, which is why I'm thankful for Nikki for adding in all the photos that we did have of some of the fish. But depending on where you are on the island and depending on the time, you can see a lot of different things. We have, for example, black sea bass that's there. Because we are kind of upriver from the harbor mouth, we're a really good spot for young fish. It's a good nursery spot. You can see this is like not a full-grown black sea bass, but they really like the rocky bottoms. We have a northern puffer that will come, this one right here. Northern puffers will come through, which is really fun. We have northern pipefish, who are kind of like if you had a seahorse but stretched it out really long. And they kind of eat the same things. That's us seining in the river. We have American eels, which is really great. And depending on where you are, when you are, there's a whole bunch, a whole teeming life under the water surface. So I'm glad that I get to do a lot of these things and share it with people, either virtually now or hopefully in person again at some point.
That was I love that description that Helen McDonald had in her book when we were talking with Andrew Farnsworth when she went up to the top of the Empire State Building to watch the bird migration. And she said, there's a whole nother world up here of creatures that she hadn't necessarily thought about. And, so now I'm going to read from this chapter called Calendar's Poetica. Ars Poetica literally means the art of poetry, and it generally follows that an ars poetica is thought of as writing about writing, a way of knowing, of seeing a poet's rhetoric. Here then is my take on writing during the first year I became a mother in Western New York, and she goes down through all the months. So I thought I would read March. I hide away in New York's Koreatown for a long weekend, eating spicy noodles and bibimbap. My third poetry manuscript is almost done, and it is time to work on my table of contents and the structure of my book. I finished reading 3 novels in 3 days. When I get back, I wear my son against my chest around the house and on errands. I need his heartbeat right up on top of mine again. I refrain from snipping any of the snowdrops that bloomed while I was gone. I let them stay. Now there are snowdrops on Randall's Island, aren't there? Didn't I see some the other day?
Yeah, there are quite a few. They're coming up. They've been up for a while. And I think some of the other bulbs, the smaller ones, we saw some Chenodoxa coming up in the woodland as well. So the tinier ones are coming up.
And how long do they last? How long would something like the snowdrops, how long do they stay? A few weeks or?
I'm not entirely sure of the timeline for that particular plant. I would say probably a few weeks. Definitely, I think right before summer, they'll start to die back down. But yeah, they're a good introduction to spring. You know spring is coming when they're there, for sure.
So, Jackie, did you want to?
Yeah, I guess my thoughts when she was kind of going through what she did for the year was also kind of going through what we have done for the year. Especially March is such an interesting time at Randall's Island because you kind of go from this tiny core team that has spent a lot of the winter, well, especially this winter, a lot of the winter planning for what's to come. And then all of a sudden, March 15th, everybody kind of starts again. And it's this rush of, okay, we have all these ideas that we want to put in place. Let's make sure we're set up for it. And then everybody comes back and you can actually go and start doing all of these things. And so it's always a really fun time in March where you've kind of stared at the same people for, you know, a couple of months now, maybe a little longer. And then now you have all of this fresh new energy to do all that you've been planning and all that you've kind of held on to during the winter. And now the weather's turning warm. You can tell that it's spring with all the snowdrops coming out. So I'm excited. We're kind of in like the early swing of getting everybody on board with all of the ideas that we've had, and then starting new ideas as new people come in and bring in their own ideas too. So March is a good time to be on the island.
I noticed Sierra Siedel is on the call, and I was wondering if you could tell us what's happening at the farm right now. We had that wonderful program about the urban farm. Can you update us a little bit?
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks for inviting me in to speak. It's great to be back on the call. Victoria and Jackie shared so many wonderful things about the island, and the farm is really a part of all of that. So we, similarly to the other spaces, the other gardens and the waterfront and all of that, we're also coming back alive. So our farmers have been out on the farm daily for the past couple of weeks, getting our first crops in the ground. We're prepping our beds. So just today we seeded a bunch of carrots. We also harvested we harvested about 10 pounds of carrots the other day that had overwintered. And we harvested some spinach this morning to clear some space. And so we're really getting the first flavors, first taste of the season in March, which is so wonderful.
Great.
Yeah, and we're of course welcoming everyone back into the space too. So if you all find yourselves on the island, I know Elizabeth, you came around the one day we weren't there.
Well, I'll be back. No, it's nice weather, so I'll be around. Don't worry.
The invitation is for everyone here to come join us.
And Chris, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about like the birds, and we had that. What else is going on that the other wonders?
Well, I really love what Jackie said about the brants and being able, I think the birds are a wonderful seasonality here on the island that we get to appreciate. I know for me, watching them start to build their nests at this time of year, and then in a few months, we get to see the eggs come to hatch and these young hatchlings start to grow up, and you start to get attached to these bird families that you see throughout the spring. And then I find it very appropriate that by June, they start to fledge and leave their nests. And it always seems to sync up around graduation season. And I know we shouldn't, impose our human experiences on the wildlife, but there's a part of me that can't help but just sort of enjoy the fact that as our 18-year-olds and humans are graduating into the world, so are these young birds that we watch be, from eggs to adults in the next couple of months.
Well, I think that's that's kind of what we're, looking at that. I think that's what, both Helen and Amy are doing kind of, is that this cycle. And, now to reflect, I think I was looking the other day and I realized how many of the books that I'm reading now have to do with nature in one way or another. And I think that, as I said, when I opened the program, I think we have a new appreciation because we've recognized we had to be inside and we were kind of confined. And now we're living, when you look at what's happening in the city, so much is outdoors, and the restaurants taking over the streets and the arts. Lincoln Center is going to have an arts program that's outside. Things are being reimagined, and clearly we're going to have to adapt them around the cycles of nature because of the difficulties in winter and the unexpected aspect right now with climate change of, the potential for other kind of unexpected weather situations.
Yeah.
So
I would just also add, I think when we were all locked down last year, there was something really beautiful, and kind of going back to something Victoria said about how these same plants, it's the same ones that are coming back, these beautiful perennials. There was something really comforting to me knowing that even though our lives have been upended in these like incredible ways that I could never have imagined, prior to what happened last year, the trees, the perennials, the plants, the birds, everything was kind of moving on in a way that gave me a sense that like, yes, time is moving and that's okay. And we may be stuck in this thing, but time is moving and that's a good thing.
And nature is resilient. You know, there's a resiliency to nature that you know we can perhaps learn from. So I wondered if are there some questions? Would anyone else like to ask a question? Nikki, are there any questions in the chat?
We don't have any questions in the chat. I can certainly show some more pictures too if people are interested in seeing more of that. I'm happy to do that as well. If I can, you guys let me know. Would that be helpful if I just brought up some pictures and you guys could just share where on the island people can find them? Okay, let's see. And Jackie, I don't know, like when I started, I didn't know what seining was. So I don't know if everyone knows, I'm finding the seining picture, what seining is. I don't know if you.
Yes, I think, yes, exactly.
Yeah, so seining is a really great way of collecting, depending on kind of where you are, it's a really great way of collecting information about the fish in the water. And so there's a couple of ways to do it, but the way we're doing here is essentially it's a long net, a long mesh net attached on 2 poles, and you essentially drag it through the water, pull it up on shore, and then kind of go through and see what you catch. And so for us, this is a great way for us to catch kind of the smaller fish, the young of the year fish that are living in our waters. It's also a really good educational tool. It gets the students excited about the water. A lot of times when you pull up a fish, the initial reaction is, why is it slimy? I don't want to touch it. But when you are the one who helped pull it through the water, and it's kind of like okay, well, now we have to put them in the water so that, you know, they aren't just kind of on shore. Everybody kind of gets over the slimy part of it and says, oh, this is a good thing to do. And then they start asking questions about, oh, what's this? What's that? What else can you find? Oftentimes they ask, is there a shark? No, though I believe there were dolphins the other day.
I was just going to ask you, did you see the dolphins from Randall Island?
I did not, but some of our colleagues in the Astoria Park has seen them and sent photos over, which is really exciting. Which is hopefully one day we'll see them, but for now we still have our fiddler crabs and the little Hellgate salt marsh, as well as all of the other fish that are in there.
So what are those little crabs? I mean, what do you do with those little crabs? Can you see them on the rocks?
Yeah, so they're really fun. They like to kind of dig in down into the mud. And you can see fiddler crabs are the type of crabs where it's like one small claw and one big claw for the males. And they're also really good educational tool. Not that they aren't good themselves, but for us, they're a really good educational tool to get students interested in this wetlands.
Yeah. Now, there were cherry blossoms on, Nikki, aren't there cherry blossoms on Randall's Island? And you have a cherry blossom festival too, don't you?
Yes, we do. We have the cherry blossom celebration. We'll start at the very end of April 26th, then go through May 2nd. And the height of it will be that weekend. And the cherry blossoms will be peaking on the farm at that time. So we're encouraging everyone to come out, and hopefully we'll have beautiful weather to come and walk. We'll have other things going on too. We'll have the nature challenge. I don't know if Jackie, you want to just talk a minute or two and see if we can recruit some people to come to the island and help us with that. That would be great. And all the while you can enjoy the farm and the cherry blossoms too. So I don't know if you want to say a few words about that.
The City Nature Challenge is really exciting. It originally started in San Francisco, but it's essentially a way to get everybody to kind of document what is around them. And so normally it's kind of a competition between all the cities, and it's even gone international. But this year and last year, it's kind of more of a community sense. You can go to this website or download an app on your phone called iNaturalist. It's inaturalist.org for the website, and I can put it in the chat. But you go around and you take a photo of any living organism that you see. And then in the second phase of it, it's essentially people on the website will help you identify what you saw. So it's really cool way of kind of interacting and learning more about what you see during your walks. I know definitely there have been plants that I've always walked by, never really given more thought to until I started doing exactly citizen science work. And by taking this picture, somebody helped me identify it, which then gave me a name to go and find out more information. So it's, you can always use iNaturalist, but they always set aside a weekend to kind of build up the buzz about it and get a lot of people interested at once.
And that weekend will be, if you want to come and have your phone, we can help you learn how to use it. And, you know, and we certainly have enough creatures and plant life on the island to keep people busy for quite some time. So we encourage you to come out and do that. And again, enjoy the cherry blossoms. There'll be, we'll have other things going on, and we'll be able to share a lot more of the information we have a lot of great, wonderful plans for the spring and summer. And we'll be unveiling a lot of that soon. So that will also sort of be at the height of our start of all things, you know, summer, and again, hopefully getting people outside. So we're really excited about that. So,
and we hope that the reading will prompt some of you to do some writing, some keeping journals, thinking about poetry and words, and then with Rebecca, doing some drawing. And as I say, you do not need to be an artist to participate in this program. You just need some paper and a pencil. And I think it's going to be a very special, Rebecca's wonderful, and I think it's going to be a very nice program. So anyway, I wanted to share with you before we leave, I worked with, for years with a woman named Deanna Bulmori, who was a visionary landscape architect. And she wrote a book called A Landscape Manifesto with 25 manifesto points about nature and landscape. So the 25th, and we made these pins. So the 25th manifesto point is, we must put the 21st century city in nature rather than put nature in the city. So I thought that was kind of appropriate for this evening. I was going to wear it. She has, Deanna has just wonderful, I'll share with you, all of you sometime, her 25 manifesto points, but it was always about nature, and you know, it's not putting this, it's, you know, it's putting the city in nature. So anyway, well, this has been really a lovely conversation, and I hope all of you are having a chance to read. You know, this is just, it's really a lovely book, and it particularly, and the illustrations, Nikki and I have been trying to see if we could get the illustrator to join us for a talk. I think we're still waiting actually to hear back from her to see if she might. There are some absolutely beautiful illustrations in the book, but it's just, it's her choice of words and her, you know, how she thinks about nature, and gives us a lot to think about. So I thank all of you for joining us this evening. And thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Victoria, Chris, Ciara. And I can't wait to come to the farm. And I hope maybe I can bring back a carrot or two.
Thank you all very, very much again, and for jumping in, and for spending time with us, and I get to work with you guys, so I'm very happy about that. So and Victoria, again, welcome, and thank you for you know, again, what, 6-7 days in, jumping into this, and we hope you all will join us again on April 8th and the 22nd for our continuation of our conversation, and again with pencil and paper in hand. And please keep checking our website. Again, we'll be posting lots of new things for spring, and we would love for you all to join us on the island.
In fact, we have our poetry project.
Yes. Oh, I almost forgot. So yes, we have our poetry project on April 14th. So we hope you'll join us. So right in between our next 2 dates, we will have poetry projects. So it's a Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock. Please come and join us. Elizabeth will be co-hosting and sharing. We'll be sharing pre-recorded poets reading their own work. So and that's really in celebration of National Poetry Month.
And we have Teresa Voda, who's a very well-known poet, is really going to manage the program and introduce the poets. And we have some very well-known poets, so it should be, should be a good program.
Yes, and just in the chat, thank you, Jennifer. She just she just put where you can view that link and be able to find out more information. So, and again, I'm always available if anyone has any questions or would like to talk further. So again, thank you all. Have a wonderful evening. Enjoy the nice weather, and we hope to see you in a few weeks.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Lovely. It was
Have a
lovely.
good night.
Good night.
Bye.